Alright, it's time for another video you all probably have no interest in. We're going with totally small limited releases this time to fill in this September gap once again.
Yeah, I know you love the September gap.
Yes, there's one more week of this, and then we're back to normal, I think.
Yep.
So, we have our little film festival we usually have when you get back of all the new movies we missed. Hopefully they're still around here. Let's pray.
Let's hope so.
But for now, we're going to start by talking about Time Out of Mind, which, as I said before, is it's Richard Gere's new movie by Orton Riverman, who did The Messenger, and he was a writer on Love and Mercy recently.
Yes.
So, we begin, and there's really no beginning. We're just dropped in the middle of this. The important thing here is that this is a really good showcase for Richard Gere. That's pretty much what the whole purpose of the movie is. It's one of those movies that was made specifically to be a showcase for an actor that could really, that is good enough that merits some attention. And this is a leading role that will give them that. Because Richard Gere has been kind of on a roll lately. I've always thought he was been really likable ever since back in the 80s and now, but lately he's really been showing just how good he is. And this is no difference. Regardless of the movie itself, this is a really great performance from him, and it's definitely a good, to Orton Riverman's credit, it makes for a really good starring role. He's really good at writing for actors, as we saw with Ben Foster and Woody Harrelson. And once again, much like The Messenger, this movie begins with a Steve Buscemi cameo. It's him sleeping in a bathtub, and he's talking about, well, I think we're supposed to assume he also has some mental health problems as well, but they don't really go as much into that. But when we first see him, he's been sleeping in a bathtub, and he's talking about this woman, and we have no idea if this woman exists, or who she is, or his relation to her, or anything. And Buscemi is the owner of this building, and is kicking him out on the streets. And thus ends our Buscemi cameo. The thing that kind of really makes this movie stand out, not only his performance, but focusing on the realism of it, and one thing that really brings in the realism is watching the people that he interacts with. Every now and then it's a recognizable actor, but also sometimes it kind of seems either it's a really good actor or it's somebody that was just kind of picked up off the street and would just act natural. I'm not sure which one they did, but regardless, it's hard to tell the difference. So that really kind of brings in a reality that really gives you more of a feel of what Gere's character is going through and makes him very sympathetic, regardless of what he goes through or how he reacts to certain things. The main thing it kind of surrounds itself with, though, that kind of brings it down a little bit is, naturally, he has Jenna Malone is in this movie, who I love, but doesn't really get to do much in most of the things she's in, sadly. And once again, in this case, she is playing his estranged daughter that he has to try to reconnect with. And as I'm watching this movie, trying to take it as Gere's doing really good, I like the realism, I like kind of the mystery surrounding this character. It always falls back on an estranged daughter. Every single time. That's just what happens. It seems every time there's an enigmatic character in a movie who's just kind of on a journey seemingly to nowhere, chances are he's looking for his daughter trying to reconnect. And it's a really, really popular thing going on. So, but even so, that's not really an overwhelming aspect of it. A lot of the movie is devoted to him meeting Ben Vereen in a shelter, who you probably know as, most famously, probably as Will's dad on Fresh Prince, but he was also in All That Jazz and a few other recognizable roles, I'm sure, that have slipped my mind at the moment. He's also really good in this, and he's a really nice contrast to Gere's kind of, not so much confined character, but he's definitely more reserved, and Vereen's definitely the guy that's very boisterous and is you know, always getting in trouble and just doing whatever. And they kind of have this nice contrast, like a grumpy old men kind of thing going on as they go throughout the movie for that portion of it. They actually get referred to as being like an old married couple at some point in the movie. So that portion is really good, but it's also the scenes where it's just kind of Gear just by himself, just having to kind of just do. He's either looking for beer or food or shelter. That's pretty much his whole life. It was also giving me vibes, especially when they were together. It was giving me vibes of a movie that's not that popular called The Saint of Fort Washington, with Matt Dillon and Danny Glover, which is not like a great movie or anything, but it's one I would seek out if you take to something like this. I was getting a lot of familiarity with that movie while watching this, which that's kind of what it is. It's you just much like I said about that movie. It's not something that's great or anything, but you know, it's good for one time, even if it's long. Especially when it's very, very kind of bare bones a little bit, as far as what's happening in it. It's an exact 2 hours, which is a bit much for this. Maybe an hour 40 would have cut it, probably. But still, it does give you a good feel of the journey he's gone through, and you kind of somewhat feel like you've gone through it with him by the end of it and all that. That is until the movie just kind of stops. And there's really not many directions for it to go, obviously, so it's just kind of and it kind of stops in a place where it's kind of like, I mean, it does give you like, it doesn't give you outright closure, but it hints at closure. But even so, it just kind of feels like it just kind of abruptly reaches that point when it seemed like it was going in a totally different direction like 30 seconds ago. So that felt kind of like they just were kind of like, okay, let's kind of end this now. We've done what we need to do. We're getting, you know, Richard Gere being talked about again, so, but that's fine. You know, any great work that Richard Gere can get and show off, I think he's definitely an actor that doesn't get enough appreciation. I mean, yeah, there's still people that love him, sure, but I don't, as far as being like an actor, I don't think he quite gets that appreciation that he should probably have by now. So yeah, it's fine. It's just a little long, and the one story it kind of tries to stick with has obviously been there, done that territory over and over again. But it's worth checking out for sure. So especially if you like the director's other movies and you're a fan of Gere and want to see what else he can do. All of that. You're like one of two people that saw Saint of Fort Washington and liked it. So that's what that is. Our second movie is Before We Go, which you may have heard not very favorable things about. This is that movie that was Chris Evans' directorial debut that didn't do very well critically. And when it premiered at TIFF, like, just nobody reacted to it. What it is it's him and Alice Eve, and he's hanging out in a train station playing his trumpet, and she misses her train. So he meets up with her and says, "I'll help you." And then Chris Evans attempts to recreate Before Sunrise. It's exactly what the movie is. He's not even hiding it. The word before is in the title. He's not hiding it. Now, this is okay. Obviously, I was going in thinking this was going to be... I don't like to, you know, stick absolutely with reviews that I've heard. Not even reviews, just little comments or little tiny headlines that I saw going in. But it was in my head that people don't like this movie when I saw it. So, when I went in, I was just kind of, let's just see what happens. Because Chris Evans got real passionate about directing. He was doing his whole, I'm gonna get rid of my contract with Marvel, I'm just gonna direct movies, I'm gonna stop acting, everything's gonna be great. This came out, people didn't like it, and now he's all psyched about renewing his Marvel contract. That's just the way it rolled, so, but I don't know. The main thing here are the characters, which are, it's nothing against Alice Eve personally, just so far, I really don't find her that interesting as an actress. There's really nothing much that she's done that really stands out as anything, really. And here she's basically doing like an 80s Elizabeth Shue. That's the vibe I was getting with what she was doing here. And Chris Evans is basically playing that guy. That guy that Chris Evans has been for quite some time now. Disregarding stuff like Snowpiercer and the like. He's pretty much being that suave, smooth, charming guy that can pretty much get anything he wants if he charms you enough. And you like him anyway because he's so charming. How many times can you say the word charming talking about Chris Evans?
Yeah.
Trouble is that kind of gets a little tiresome after a bit. Not only because you've seen him play the character so many times, but given that you're spending the whole length of the movie with this guy, and that's just kind of his thing, and that's about it. He's also doing a little bit of his character from London. I don't know how many people saw that movie with him, Jason Statham, and Jessica Biel, where it's just an hour and a half of he and Jason Statham in a bathroom doing cocaine. And that's just all it is, right?
That sounds fun.
Louis C.K. had a cameo in it. And the thing about it is, because his story is that his ex is in town, and he hasn't seen her in like 6 years, and he really wants to reconnect with her. And she's trying to get back to her husband or boyfriend or whatever he was. So they're trying to help each other out. But the issue here is it's one of those movies where we spend time with them, but their problems are slowly revealed as the movie moves forward, as opposed to just kind of it all being laid out and then we follow them. But normally when you do this, it's because their problems are really interesting and will make make it seem like, there are plot turns and stuff like that. Oh my god, the shit they're going through is just not interesting. Like, who fucking cares? And they kind of unfold like they're supposed to be these big reveals, but it's just, I don't know. I don't care. I don't care about these people. And when they get themselves into trouble, there's really no danger, and there's really no stakes to be had, because at one point, her purse gets stolen, and he figures out where it is, and there's like a stolen purse ring going on in this building. So he goes up there and he's like, oh man, this is a really shitty part of town. So he goes up in the building and he gets into a fight, and he's gonna say, yeah, I got it, I got the purse, yeah. But then they make this whole deal about how they can't call the cops because the cops won't show up in this part of town. There's like a whole dialogue about that right before he goes in the building. Do not call the cops because the cops will not show up because we're in this part of town. Well, this scene ends, because it has no other way to end, with the cops showing up. And that's how he gets, I guess that's how he gets away. Because he's obviously in there. I thought it was going to be this whole, oh, he's incriminated now because he's in here, and he'll probably get taken away as well. But it turned out that she called the cops. So we had a whole scene devoted to don't call the cops because they won't show up. And she calls the cops and they show up in 5 minutes just so the scene can end. That's just not very well thought out, is it?
Not really.
And then you have this scene where they're up in a hotel room that they're not supposed to be in because they faked being a band so they could go into a party and play for people. So they're in this hotel room, and they're like, how do we get out of here? And she's like, oh, I know, why don't we call up a car? We'll say we're the band that's supposed to be here, and we'll drive around in their car and be awesome. And she's like, yeah, well, what if that doesn't work? And he's like, well, let's just try it out. And you think this is going to go into that whole thing, right? Or if it's not going to go well, something exciting's going to happen. Well, they go down, they pretend to be the guy, they get caught in a lie, and then they say, like, oh no, I'm this person who works for him. And then they leave without taking the car. And the movie just keeps going. Wow, that was some nice build-up for jack shit. And that's just kind of what the whole movie is, the whole time. Until his ex finally comes back into the picture, and then he gets, all dramatic and shit. And then I start to kind of wonder if we're supposed to like him or not, because there's one line. It's really the only time his character's like this, so I'm wondering if maybe I misheard it. I don't know. But when I heard this, I was just like, oh my god, who the fuck is this guy? Did he just say that? He's charming Chris Evans through the whole movie. They're buddies and they're best friends, and they might be falling in love. We don't know. But there is one line here. Like I said, maybe I just misheard it because it seems so out of nowhere and so misplaced, and there's no reaction to it. And this line I'm talking about is the girl's in here, and she gives him this big, pep rally speech about how you need to go in there and you need to, just take her heart again and be really big and be the guy that sweeps her off her feet again, do all that great stuff. And she convinces him to do it, and he goes inside, and it doesn't work out. So when he comes out pissed off, she says, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry it turned out that way. I'm sorry." And his response, I believe, is, "Sorry. Sorry because you're an idiot." I was like, what? And that line just goes completely ignored. It's like, did he really just say that to her? She was trying to help him, and for the rest of the movie, they're still best buddies. I don't think I'd let that line fly if I were her. Sure, maybe it's just said in anger and it's just one thing, but I don't know. He was awfully aggressive when he said it, and the fact that they're supposed to be falling in love, that'd be like oh, I just met you tonight, and there's a pretty good chance that that's the guy you really are, so why don't we just separate before you stab me? So, but no, they just kind of remain buddies after that. The line just comes and then goes. I don't know, that just really bothered me about him. And that's kind of the main thing here, is the movie just takes place within this one night, but when you look at Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, there's something real between them, and throughout that whole movie, where you kind of get a sense of that idea of meeting someone once, and there's like a connection, and then you just let fate take its course, or whatever. I can't think of any reason either one of them would like the other in this movie. And every time they're kind of... It seems like they're going to part ways when they come back together somehow. It feels really forced and very much like the script's hand. And they fall way too fast. Like I said, not only do they fall way too fast for each other, I have no idea why. So, I'm sure there's a charm that could be had in it for a little while, but for the most part, yeah, I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to go down. And they kind of tried to do like a Lost in Translation ending, kind of. So they're just really trying these temporary romance cliches. So I don't know what was going on here. Maybe he might have promise later as a director, but I don't know. Not with this script anyway. It's kind of hard to tell because the script bogs it down so much. I have no idea if, maybe he'd handle something else better or not. I have no idea, but maybe we'll find out. Maybe we never will. Maybe he'll just stick with Marvel and call it a day. So, our third movie is from Sundance, and it's called For Zachariah. And this movie is quite simple. There are 3 actors in it, and it's one of those end-of-the-world movies, basically. Something has happened, and then we have Margot Robbie, who's under the impression she's pretty much the last person on Earth. And so she's kind of doing her thing until she comes across Chiwetel Ejiofor, who thought he thought he was the only person on Earth, and now they have met, and they join forces, and they're going to try to kind of maybe possibly hope to rebuild society. And then a third person comes into play, who is Chris Pine, and that kind of throws things a little off.
I Am Not Legend.
And yeah. So, that's what this movie is. It's from the director of Compliance.
Really?
It's his movie following that.
That's cool.
I believe this is his follow-up to it. I don't think there was anything in between unless I'm forgetting something. And so, if you were curious about Margot Robbie, you may not be sure yet because she did The Wolf of Wall Street, which, is what it is. And then there was Focus, where it's like, she's really fun to look at, but this movie's kind of dull. So, so if you weren't quite sure how to take her as an actress, this is a movie that rests on her a lot, like just by herself. And she carries it really well. I think she's a really promising actress, and that's not just because she's really fucking good looking.
It doesn't hurt at all.
No, she's a very capable actress, I think. And the fact that she was able to do a movie like this early into her acting career is really ballsy, and should be commended. Especially acting against Chiwetel Ejiofor for most of it. Because that dude's a heavyweight now.
He really is.
And Chris Pine's really good too, of course. He's really coming up there too. Despite the fact that he's basically playing Darwin Tremor again, like in his voice and everything. So yeah, that's all this movie is. And there was a lot of people who just kind of say it came and went for them, like they really had no reaction to it. I was into it for the most part. I thought the scenes where it's just her, I think she handles really well, and then the scene where it's both of them, they work together really well. And then Pine kind of comes in as a nice contrast. I was a little concerned about where it was going to go when Pine came in. And the movie kind of died down for a little bit while I was trying to kind of, wonder if this movie was going to take a huge dive or become something really great, or if it was just going to kind of stay here. And it didn't really... I guess it just kind of stayed in the middle, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it was kind of fine where it was at. Because it's really risky to kind of do not a third act twist, but it's a little less than halfway in when Pine comes in, I think. And that basically kind of, if you have something good going, that kind of setup is very easy to make the movie derail. But that didn't really happen, so that was a relief. It reminded me a lot of a movie called The Quiet Earth from 1985, I think. Which was also, I believe, also kind of, I don't think he's outright said this, but when you just watch it, you can kind of tell, I think The Quiet Earth kind of also influenced Danny Boyle when he did 28 Days Later. And that's a movie that's pretty much the same concept. Somebody thinks they're the last person on Earth, and then another person comes in, and then another person, and then shit goes down. And that's a really great movie if you can find it. It's a bit arty if that doesn't bother you, but it's really, really great if you can check it out. This review of For Zachariah is brought to you by please go watch The Quiet Earth. But no, this is fine. I was alright with it. There is an ambiguous ending that I wasn't sure about when I first saw it, and it's kind of one of those ambiguous endings where you're kind of like, it kind of took the easy way out. Because it really set up an interesting conflict, and then it just kind of stops it real quick. In a way that you are not quite sure if it works or not. But when I think back on it, the ending is kind of growing on me, and I'm fine with it. It doesn't feel that... It doesn't necessarily feel out of place that they went that way. It doesn't feel too much like they went an easy way out, so... One thing this movie is getting a lot of attention for, though, is its score. Which is really good. A lot of it is... I guess it's kind of a combination, but a lot of it comes from... Margot Robbie plays, I think it's a harpsichord in the church that her dad built, and that's where a lot of the music seems to come from. I assume that's just part of the score as well, so... yeah, it's worth checking out. It's just a lot of people don't really have much of a reaction to it, but I thought it was fine. But it just made me want to watch The Quiet Earth again. So, and I guess 28 Days Later for that matter. But I'm of course talking about like the first 15 minutes of 20 Days Later before all hell breaks loose.
What do you think this movie was when you just saw the title without knowing anything about it?
Some like Amish period piece.
Is it bad? The first thing that came to my mind was they were doing like an ABC's of Death type thing.
That's weird. I never got that vibe.
No, I'm not. So movie. I mean, just like knowing just that title. Okay. The title alone.
Yeah, because the first time I saw it was on the website for Sundance, and I'd seen the picture of them. So
yeah,
it gave me in mind that it was like I guess when you say Zachariah, you instantly think Amish people.
Yeah.
It's not like Amish people are gonna see this video. It takes a computer. So. Oh, offended.
Oh man.
So. No, seriously.
I know it. I know. That's one way to look at it.
So, our fourth movie, is Queen of Earth, which is basically an indie showcase for Elizabeth Moss. It's from what is the director's name? Perry. It's 3 names, and I believe his last name is Perry. He did a couple of movies that I've seen. He did The Color Wheel, and he did Listen Up, Philip.
Alex Ross Perry.
Yes, that's it. The Color Wheel is an excruciating movie experience that I would not wish on my worst enemies. Well, there's a lot of things I wish on my worst enemies. Probably that, too.
Same here.
And Listen Up, Philip, which wasn't bad. It had a really good Elizabeth Moss performance in it, and it had Jason Schwartzman and Jonathan Pryce. I didn't hate it, but it was basically like watching an art student with their head up their ass for 2 hours, which isn't all that great. So I was concerned going into this, especially since this movie is getting a really mixed reaction. People are either falling head over heels in love with it, or they fucking hate it. So I had no idea where I was gonna land. And I'm fine with it. I think it's good. It is, she and Catherine Waterston from Inherent Vice are going out to, they've been best friends forever, and they're going out to a cabin, which is something they do annually, and they just hang out. But she may or may not, she just got out of a relationship, and she may or may not, Elizabeth Moss's character may or may not be on the verge of going completely insane. And from then on, it's just a very, very slow burn thriller. And it adds there's an obstacle in her life when Catherine Waterston's time is taken up by her new boyfriend, who is Patrick Fugit, actually.
Yes! I thought I saw his name and it made me mark out when I just saw his name in the cast.
And that's basically all it is. You just kind of watch it, and it just kind of slowly burns until she's kind of slowly going more and more off the deep end. And obviously you can mainly watch it for her performance. That's basically, once again, it's one of those movies that basically seems to exist solely to show off a certain actor or actress's acting talent. Though Waterston is also quite good. Moss really kind of just overshadows everything. And I'll tell you what, I know this is going to turn you off, and if somebody had said it to me, I certainly would have, but while watching it, only one movie came to mind, but this one's a much better version of it. I'm of course referring to Martha Marcy May Marlene. It's like a good version of that. I know people love that movie.
Playing the guitar right now.
I know people love that movie, but I fucking hate it so much. This is a much better version of it, in my opinion, personally. That's also because I think Elizabeth Moss is a much better actress than the Elizabeth that was in that movie.
One Elizabeth is better than the other.
Yes. So, and there are things in there where it took me a long time to get into it. It's like, I'm all for slow burn movies for sure, but this one really takes a little while. It's only an hour and a half, but that first 40 minutes or so is really, really, it really tests your patience, but once you can get there, you do start to appreciate it once it really takes off. And it's just interesting to watch this character just kind of slowly, because after a while the character becomes unpredictable. There is one particular scene that stands out where she finds a guy passed out in the middle of the woods and brings him inside the house, and they're just sitting there talking, and she just smiles at him and says, they're talking about how he doesn't really know anybody and nobody saw him come out here or anything. So she just smiles and says, wow, so I could just murder you right now. And then the scene ends and we never see that dude again. And we have no idea what that was. It could have been a dream, it could have been something where it just went nowhere. Or it could be the extreme. We have no idea. It just leaves it there for us to decide what in God's name that was. And there's really, it's kind of littered with that kind of stuff. That a lot of movies like this tend to do that most of the time. So, yeah, it's definitely easy to see why it's an acquired taste. Like I said, the reaction I had to Martha Marcy May Marlene is the reaction it's getting from a lot of people. So, maybe, I don't know, maybe people, I have no idea if people will like both, or if they're like me and will like either one or the other. I don't know. But yeah, once it reached its second half, I was a lot more into it and more invested in it, so, I kind of get the criticisms against it, but, once it got there, I was with it, so. Our last movie is Digging for Fire, which is Joe Swanberg's new movie, which is always nice. This dude is fun to watch, because it's one of those things where it's very easy to kind of, because he's got such a he's got a really large community going on now. There are a lot of actors who want to be in his movies, and this is basically like a reunion for all of them. Like, almost everybody that's ever been in one of his movies, plus new people, are in this movie. This movie's cast list is so huge, and the movie is so tiny. It's kind of surreal to watch, really. But the main story is Jake Johnson and Rosemary DeWitt are a married couple. And they come out in this house that is owned by, I don't really remember who, somebody that Rosemary DeWitt knows or works with. And while they're just there to kind of spend the weekend there, Rosemary DeWitt's going to go do her thing, and Jake Johnson's going to hang out and do taxes and dad things. But he goes out to a hill right next to the house and finds a human bone and a gun, and decides that there's probably a body buried in that hill, and he becomes hellbent on finding it, on digging it up while she's gone. And that's kind of the setup for basically just this character study thing that goes on. Like, obviously, if you've seen Swanberg's movies, you know that they're just kind of, there's really no specific story that needs to be had. We're just kind of watching characters go through their lives and do the shit that they do, and how they react to the things that they do, and the things that happen, and consequences, etc. Swanberg and Jake Johnson wrote it. This is obviously one of those movies where I'm not sure what the script looks like, because it's pretty much just a lot of improvisers coming to improvise. And that's pretty much what the whole thing is, or at least they get a real feel of it when it actually is scripted. And we have so many people here. We have his kind of best friend, I guess, is Mike Birbiglia, who comes in and out of the movie. And then they decide to have a party, and this party gets bigger and bigger, and after a while, Brie Larson shows up, Sam Rockwell shows up, Anna Kendrick shows up, and Chris Messina shows up. And they just hang out and do cocaine and go skinny dipping and do all that stuff. And he's basically trying to get them involved in the hunt for the body, but everybody's just kind of too bored or too drunk or too coked out of their mind to do it. And then, we got more people. We have, Rosemary DeWitt goes to visit a couple of friends, some married friends, Melanie Linsky and Ron Livingston. People just pop up out of nowhere in this movie.
Sounds like it.
And it's really funny that she's visiting Ron Livingston, who is married to Melanie Linsky, because in real life, it's Rosemary DeWitt that's married to Ron Livingston. So that must have been an interesting scene. Who else do we have? And later on, she visits her parents. I can't remember off the top of my head who her mom is, but her dad is Sam Elliott. And then later she goes to a bar and picks up Orlando Bloom. And then he just came from out of nowhere in this. And then there's scenes where she's a yoga instructor at the beginning of the movie, and Jenny Slate is one of her clients. And then she's just walking around on the beach towards the end, and Jane Addams is there with a telescope. It's just spot the indie actor or actress throughout this whole movie. And a lot of people accuse Swanberg of basically just using this movie as an excuse to hang out. Like, this is like Swanberg's Adam Sandler movies, what people are saying. But he does so much interesting things in these movies and knows when characters are being interesting that I have no problems with this at all. Like, there are times where this movie feels so directionless, but there's just something about it that you can't help but really like. And I don't know how he does that, but he's got a really firm grip on this, how to do indie character studies, things that kind of seem directionless. Because, like, obviously our main plot here is the fact that they're at this house and that body is buried in the hill, possibly. But every time a new character is introduced, it, like, goes on a whole different tangent. It goes in a totally different direction that seems like it's just going to be just totally pointless. But it somehow manages to always come back, and even though that probably was pointless and didn't serve the story in any way whatsoever, they just create characters that are interesting to watch, with actors that we love to watch. That's probably how they pull it off. So, yeah, I don't always love his movies. Like, I thought Happy Christmas was just okay. And, you know, when Greta Gerwig's involved, I don't know.
Why is Greta not in this movie? She's the only one missing.
Maybe that's why I liked it so much.
Oh.
So, so yeah, I dug this. So, I guess we're done with this video. Yeah.
Alright, before we leave for another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews, I do want to go through some ratings real quick. Time out of mind?
2.5.
Before we go?
2.
Z for Zachariah.
2.5.
Queen of Earth.
3.
And Digging for Fire.
3.
All right. So that's another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews. The final Robin Williams themed Versus is coming this Sunday, so in 2 days you'll be able to check that out. A lot of Horror Nights stuff coming at you. Hopefully you guys and girls out there enjoying the content here in Orlando, so hopefully you like that. And stick with us. We got some great stuff coming. So next week, AJ's Movie Reviews will be tackling what, AJ?
A list of 10 movies.
Ah, one of those videos. And then we'll be back to normal the week after.
Yes.
So
this is my fuck it list. This is some shit
this is
that
your
I
Mean
watched.
Gene list.
And here are some quick things of what I have to say. Let's just get to the movies everybody wants to hear about next week. That's what the list of 10 is.
So to be completely honest, this is one of those videos that's going to have like reviews that a lot of people want from reviews, like 5 seconds, boom, bing, bang.
That
over.
Probably from movies that there are movies that have been out for a while, obviously.
Okay.
That we missed earlier in the year. Maybe a few people will be looking. There are a few in there that people will actually be looking for. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
All right. That being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?